the 11th of the 9th, 2024. The time is 5 minutes to 8. And we've got to talk about Adrian Newey and breaking bias, of course. British bias, of course, because it's gone chaotic. I reported on Adrian Newey earlier, thinking that the story was going to be his criticism of Maximilian Verstappen, saying that he was a bit out of order in his overcrowding, his very aggressive overcrowding of one Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton at the 2021 Brazilian Grand Prix. But the story was not that. Of course, non-British F1 viewers want to talk about British bias because Adrian Newey has talked about it in his most recent interview of High Performance Podcast. I was going to bring it up and dissect it so we could go through it in earnest, but I want to recant it verbatim. I think it would be more impactful that way. When asked about some of Maximilian Verstappen's difficulties towards the end of the 2021 season, Adrian Newey said how you knew that Max was suffering from pressure, that now he was the hunted, no longer the hunter, and this made for a difficult championship circumstance as far as Red Bull Racing and Maximilian Verstappen, with a charging Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton breathing down his neck. Michael, you're a legend. That this made it difficult. How you know that it was difficult for Max Verstappen is because Checo Perez, who is a gazillion miles away from Max Verstappen as far as his quality of drive, his steering and throttle inputs, normally 2 to 3 tenths would be the delta between Messrs Verstappen and Checo Perez. But towards the latter stages of that season, Adrian Newey says that you could tell that Max was suffering ever so slightly from the pressure by virtue of Sir Lewis Hamilton and, of course, Mercedes having gained themselves time. Tricky, very techie rear wing settings. That all you needed to look at even was the convergence that was Checo Perez and Max Verstappen, that Max indeed was suffering from the pressure. Jake Humphries of the High Performance Podcast. And again, go and check it out because it's brilliant. It's a very good podcast. Oh, the humanity indeed, JR. It's techie. Jake Humphries pitches the question at Adrian Newey this way. So what would you do in that instance, Adrian, when you see that your number one driver is struggling, as Max was towards the latter stages of the 2021 championship? What would you do? How would you handle it? Would you take him away, have a word? And Adrian Newey says the following. Max is his own man. He's very confident, sure of himself. He knows what he needs to do when he gets in the car. He has this uncanny ability to manage for the race in real time, as if he has all the information that the pit crew and that the guys and girls on the pit wall have access to, which is uncanny. Adrian Newey continues that there's only another couple drivers on the grid potentially capable of that level of race management with that level of information before them. Fernando El Plan Alonso, who says, is potentially one of them. That ability to read the race in real time. And again, hark back to Hungary 2007. How was he able to do what he did in the pits that day, if not for having an absolute god tier 2000 level IQ racing brain? That's what he's talking about with Fernando El Plan Alonso. The great ones have that, and so too does Max Verstappen. But then Adrian Newey continues, and this, ladies and gents, is where it gets really techie. Alan Pope, properly techie. He says of Max Verstappen that he feels he's often misunderstood. However, as goatee as he is a peddler, as fast as he is, as brilliant as he's been over the past 36 months in his execution and the upper echelons of his potential in that car, steering inputs, ridiculous, otherworldly minimum speed through some terms. You only need to look at the Austrian Grand Prix pole to see what I'm talking about. But as good as Maximilian Verstappen has been over the past couple of years, Adrian Newey says by the media and Sky F1 in particular, he says that Max is oft misunderstood, that Sebastian Vettel too, alongside Max Verstappen, has been demonised by the F1 media, not just globally, but particularly the British F1 media. Oh, the humanity. Where do we go with this, Pope? Genuinely, listen, there's no one on this earth that understands more acutely what it is to be a victim of British media, because British bias in particularly better put, because my guy Sir Lewis Hamilton came into the sport as a whirling dervish in 2007, and between 2009 and 2013 nobody's going to tell me that there's been anyone in F1 history that has been more a victim of British bias. And it sounds ironic, of course, because Sir Lewis is British, but nevertheless I saw it in real time when they were demonising, I'm going to use Adrian Newey's word here, demonising my driver Sir Lewis. He's got to be a F1 driver only. That must be his focus. He has too many external interests. Why is he at New York Fashion Week? Why is he at the Met Gala even? Why has he got a pussycat doll as a girlfriend even? Lewis Hamilton has lost focus and his potential will go unfulfilled. This is what the British biased media was saying of him at the time. This isn't me saying that there isn't such a thing as British bias. Absolutely not. But it's important to delineate. Not all criticisms aren't valid because of British bias. And you know who's testament to that? Let me debunk this. And listen, I say this as a dude who's taken a lot of flack for being clamouring, for being overly verbose in my praise of Maximilian Verstappen, right, for context. Now, sometimes you've got to leverage criticism at someone. How do I know that? Well, in the very same sentence, the precursory stanza, Adrian Newey says as much of Maximilian Verstappen, right? He criticises Max at the altar of objectivity around 2021 Brazil, saying that, yeah, Max was a bit naughty there with his overly aggressive overcrowding of one Sir Lewis Hamilton. So what are we doing here? Not all criticism can be British bias. Some criticism is valid, is it not? And I say all that to say this, because never ever on this channel will I sacrifice objectivity and truth at the altar of partisanship. Now, what the F1 community likes to do is one of these. Listen, if I disagree with it, then it's British bias, and that's nonsense. It can't be British bias every single bloody time. Adrian Newey in his criticism, very open and fair, honest criticism of some of Max's manoeuvres, love or loathe them or him, is testament to that. I don't know why in the F1 community we can't have some valid, truthful, grown-up bloody conversation. Oh, you're criticising my driver, then it's British bias. What are you talking about, mate? It's ridiculous. I can't engage that rhetoric meaningfully. Now, sometimes it is. You only need to look at Murray Walker's commentary when Damon Hill won his first and only championship in 1996, when Murray said, I've got to stop because I have a lump in my throat. Again, fresh in the memory was Graham Hill. He was a two-time champion, father of Damon, and Murray Walker was close to the family. So, of course, he's entitled to shed a tear. But I say all that to say this. You only need to go and look at the Spanish F1 broadcast, DAZN. Lobato gets mega enthusiastic. Fernando Alonso is his guy, and he makes no bones about cheering for the chap that he calls Magic. Sometimes I would argue that a broadcast is enhanced by a smidgen of British bias. When the commentator and broadcast team have skin in the game and are cheering on somebody, surely that brings more colour to the rich tapestry that is an F1 broadcast, I would argue, in my humble opinion. But I digress, because Adrian Newey continues. He says that the media have demonised not only Maximilian Verstappen, but Sebastian Vettel too. Liam, you're an absolute legend. There is British bias about the non-English drivers. Also, why do people leave Mercedes dominance out of the list of dominant periods in F1? Liam, this is the bias, right? This is the bias of the community. People want to pick and choose and do this confirmation bias and recency stuff. And as well, Liam, you're a legend, mate, because there's another question that need to get back to. Maximilian Verstappen, 2016, Trump Schumacher. I remembered, chap. I needed to give you that answer, and we'll talk more about it on the weekend, I promise. And you're too generous as always, Liam. But I say all that to say this. Adrian Newey speaks in earnest to this demonisation, and he calls out very specifically not only British media but Sky F1. He says that they're the internationally syndicated broadcast, but there is always a tinge of bias, is Adrian Newey's insinuation. alluding to the fact that it's them who demonise and have demonised Max Verstappen and Sebastian Vettel. And again, he doesn't go into details. I feel like what he wants to say is because Sky F1 is a British broadcasting entity, that by virtue of that, they're always going to do one of these. They're going to circle the wagons around the British ones, around George Russell, around Lando Norris. And to be fair, if you see the way that Natalie Pinkham communicates with a Lando Norris, as an example, this isn't me saying Pinks is biased because I think she's one of the best ones on the broadcast, I will be honest. But there is a certain endearment. You can, the tone, the mode of communication, there is a bias or a favouritism at least. See, I don't want to do this British bias and leverage that term willy-nilly because that's too easy. That's a low-hanging trope and it would be lazy of me to do that. But to say that there isn't favouritism amongst the internationally syndicated broadcast, that would be disingenuous. So too, if you take Christian Horner, he's the only team principal to still have a journalist dinner every single year. And again, he's fostering rapport and currying favour with all journos up and down the country, globally too. This is the game that they like to play, and surely F1 wouldn't be F1 without a bit of favouritism and bias, not just British. There is bias all over the world. But I'm not just talking about Formula One either. This is sports media, right? How can you not engage bias? This is a very human emotion and sentiment. I don't disagree, however, with Adrian Newey on the fact that Sebastian Vettel and Maximilian Verstappen have absolutely been demonised by the media. And there's a couple different things, threads at which we need to pull in that, right? Both were dominant. Mr. Sebastian Vettel from 2010 through to 2013. Max now from 2021 through to the present day. And that absolutely had that the demonisation, in inverted commas, absolutely is a function of dominance. Michael Schumacher to a certain extent as well, 2000 to 2004. And again, you can, in that multitudinous, that variety root cause analysis pie, you've got to talk about the mode of driving, right? Sebastian Vettel, again, if we're going to call him into question, some of his antics were chaos, right? Multi-21 was super controversial, and the British media, all buttoned up, aren't going to take well to that. There is a sporting etiquette, an old English gentleman's club thing that F1 will always have at its core, front and centre. So when Multi-21 happens, you're always going to see an Eddie Jordan or a Jackie Stewart do one of these. That's completely unacceptable. That's not within the spirit of Formula One. That's meant to be Sterling Moss and gentle. Monopoly 2, dominance will play a part. Michael Schumacher, when he parks his car up in Monaco, Rascas settings, again, that sort of skullduggery is never going to be looked on favourably, and it shouldn't be looked on favourably even by the world's media, let alone the British press. British press will come down on that like a ton of bricks, and they did do similar thing with Schumacher 1997 and Jacques Villeneuve. You heard Martin Brundle decrying the action in real time, saying to Michael over commentary, Michael, that hasn't worked, my friend. You've hit the wrong part. Now, again, German fans will say that that's British bias from Martin Brundle, but was he not just talking to his truth? And again, front and centre, fresh in the memory of Martin Brundle, will be the fact that in 1994, Michael Schumacher did a similar thing and ultimately won that championship that season. Damon Hill fans are still devastated, one of which am I, at the fact that Damon didn't, in my humble opinion, get what was rightfully his that year. Bruce, you're a legend. Nothing important, just helping you out with your Sky Sports. Bruce, you're an absolute legend. F1 TV Pro soon. I say all that to say this, and this is what's really important. Not all criticism you can't lay all criticism as, or even you can't label every single criticism as at September of 2024 as British bias, as invalid, just because you disagree with it. And again, this is the bias speaking, right? We all do it. If you criticise Lewis Hamilton, I'm going to say that you're biased, but it's not always true. Why? Because sometimes the criticism of Lewis or Max or Sky F1 or Alonso or Michael Schumacher is absolutely warranted, and I urge F1 fans to do this then. Treat each incident that we're debating, and we will always have these debates. This is what this channel is for you lot to fact check me and tell me that I'm being an idiot. Oh, Cameron with a clip. Like, we'll go back and forth, but it's far too lazy and linguistically irresponsible to each and every single time attribute a point that I disagree with to British bias. It's lazy, nonsensical, and I would attribute those characteristics and signifiers to Adrian Newey in this instance. Yes, Sebastian Vettel did get demonised, Maximilian Verstappen too, but to draw a dotted line between those two things and British biased media, I think Adrian Newey does himself a disservice. Chat, I will be honest with you. 94, Schumacher was banned multiple races. He was indeed. The FI wanted to make the championship competitive. Where have you heard that story before, Visual? Do you know what I mean? Pope, although some of the kids were born in the UK, I think it is techie, Pope, I'm telling you. Liam, you're a legend, sir. Only one car ended up in the barrier in 1994. This is true, mate. But Damon's was a DNF, wasn't it? Sadly. Bloody Nora. PTSD settings. It is techie with this. And I like that Adrian Newey was talking to it, although I think this is a difference in extents and not kinds as far as Adrian Newey is concerned. To say that those guys did get demonised isn't a lie, 100%. Max did and does get demonised at the hands of the British biased media. Of course he does. So too did Michael Schumacher. So too did Fernando Alonso, a portion, particularly on the back of 2007 at Hungary. But is that the start and the finish of the story? Can we full stop it there? Absolutely not, because sometimes these criticisms are warranted. No one's not going to tell me that in 2007 Fernando Alonso didn't warrant criticism. So too Michael Schumacher when he parked his car up in quali. Parked his car up. What are you doing? Michael Schumacher was dark arts that epitomised who he was as a person and an F1 driver. So what are we talking about here? Valid criticism, ladies and gents. Or demonisation. Adrian Newey says demonisation or demonising as far as Maximilian Verstappen and Sebastian Vettel are concerned. I say valid criticism, I'm going to be honest with you. As much as I love myself some Maximilian Verstappen, for he's one of the greatest, for the avoidance of doubt, greatest F1 drivers that I've ever seen in my life. Austrian pole, Suzuka nailing Charles Leclerc around the outside, turn one on a full tank of fuel in monsoon conditions. There aren't too many, if any, F1 peddlers that I've ever seen that. But does that mean Adrian Newey, peddlers, chat, that Max Verstappen, Michael Schumacher, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, Ayrton Senna at times, Prost too, does that mean that any of the aforementioned are above and beyond criticism, and that we need to use the lazy, low-hanging trope so as to attribute all of those people who criticise the aforementioned great drivers as having British bias or otherwise? Absolutely not. No chance. Prosecution rests. No further questions, Your Honour.